Today on Windows Wednesday, I want to talk about the video that Dave's Garage just did recently because he had a lot of really good ideas. And as much as I look back at this and say, yeah, if Windows maintained a course that he's kind of talking about, I might have actually stayed with it. But the reality is, I kind of fell in love with free and open source software as I looked as a means to avoid the crazy telemetry that Windows was doing. Let's go ahead and talk about this. Thanks for checking out this video by Switch to Linux. If you like this type of content, subscribe to the channel. If you've not already done so, leave us a like and a comment down below. And as I said, we did want to talk about the video that Dave's Garage has done. And if you have not watched this video, it's absolutely worth having a look at. He proposes in this video an alternative means, probably something he suggests you pay extra for, but it would be a feature inside of Windows that you can toggle this button and a bunch of system changes done, making the operating system more for a power user and less for the everyday person. And I think one of the big challenges I have is, looking at the cost differential. We're basically asking Windows to still charge us the same license fee they have, but then go back to what they used to do. And I don't know, I'm still thinking about that portion, but there were actually some good things that he had mentioned in there. There was also a write-up on this on Windows Central as well. So I don't think we're going to go through all of the article here, although there are some pretty nice quotes in here. And the video has some absolutely amazing and wonderful bangers that I would highly encourage you to watch this video and let me know your thoughts. But I did have some commentary on his points that I wanted to mention and chat a little bit more about Linux and some of the Linux things for the positive and, yes, in some instances for the negative. And he basically looks at this and says there should be a Windows mode, and he says, call it Windows Pro. Of course, we have that, or Windows Power User, or whatever it happens to be. He says, I don't care what the marketing is. But he identifies 3 core areas, although he addresses a few other things in there as well, which are worth talking about. Obviously, he gets a lot of things right. If you do not know, Dave is a former Microsoft developer, and one of the things that Windows does really well, as he points out, is 32 to 64-bit works great, and backwards compatibility is a thing, so that, I still have some of those old programs back in the, back from the 90s that will still run on modern Windows systems. Some things notwithstanding. I remember, if anybody still has a copy of that game Ultima 7, I think, which was designed for really slow computers, if you ran it on something more modern like a Windows 95 computer, yeah, it's that old of a game. That thing would run overclocked like super fast, and it was insane. But the reality is, yeah, Windows does a few things right. And to his point, the underlying kernel of Windows is good and it is solid. However, it is one of those black boxes that we don't really know what's going on. And that's kind of why I fell in love with the open source world, so that we kind of know what all of our code is doing. And I agree with that philosophy by and large. And, the code itself works, but he says really what's the big problem with Windows, and the reason he says Windows sucks, is because of all of the modern applications they've put on top of it to be super user-friendly. Now, he does also address a lot of other points. In fact, his point of the local accounts versus Microsoft accounts, he addresses it briefly, but it's not inside of the core of his system, the core of his bullet points, which I thought was interesting. But I think that is one of those first features. When I set up a new computer, I just went to the store and I paid a lot of money. Part of the money I paid for that was paying Microsoft a licensing fee for that computer. When I bring that computer home and I push the power button, Microsoft nowadays wants me to do an online account, and they are doing active steps to remove every possible means of creating a local account. In fact, then we get the conspiracy theories going on about why is YouTube banning all these videos about how to set up Windows without a Microsoft account. Very interesting. All right. But the point is that is my computer. I paid a lot of money for the computer, progressively higher cost. Windows is still getting a licensing fee. Why do they care if I set it up with a Microsoft account or with a local account. Now, as I have said before, the reason they care is they want to be able to perfectly authenticate every individual user using that computer at the moment. This ties into surveillance state, it ties into corporate contracts, it ties into government contracts, and it ties into a society that is becoming lower and lower trust as we move on. It is a dangerous thing. And the fact that Windows is working so hard to make sure everyone is forced to have that Microsoft account, then it is getting to the point where I don't want anything to do with Windows at this time. Now, he addresses that briefly, saying, yeah, it should be an option. And I argue that it's not because it's just part of the surveillance state. Thank you. I'll stick with my Linux. Even Mac doesn't force you that much on those particular accounts. But that is one of the features that would be in his special version, although it wasn't in his main talking points. So let's go ahead and address his talking points. The first of those that he mentioned there was telemetry. Now, he makes the argument that he likes the fact that there's telemetry. The reality is I stopped using Windows because of the telemetry. I didn't care if it was as much of a black box, although if I knew then what I know now, I would. That would be something that would steer me away. But I don't care if it is I didn't care at the time if it was a black box. For me, the fact that my computer is collecting a bunch of information about itself and shipping it up to Microsoft, that was a 100% deal breaker. Do I know that I can stop that with third-party scripts or other things on my network? Yes. But to Louis Rossman's point, I should not have to take extra steps to stop a computer from doing something. Now, if there's a easy toggle button, I could have simply turned it all off. That would also be fine. But the fact there's a basic level of telemetry that always sends and you can't turn it off, that to me was the deal breaker. That is why I switched to Linux. Now, to Dave's point, and I agree with his point at least in a theoretical principle, that all of these computers going out, and how complicated computers are, he says that telemetry is needed because you have to have a means to diagnose things. Well, there's a problem with that argument. And the big problem is that it's not sending data necessarily when things are going wrong. Microsoft's basic telemetry that you can't turn off sends a progressive stream of data, which is a whole lot more than things going wrong. It's a whole lot of things going right. It's a whole lot of things that are happening right now. It's a whole lot of functionality. Now, to his point, what he says is this pro version that he mentions this is all theoretical, it's a suggestion, he says, you could look at those kind of like you would use the no stitch application on Linux. You can look at every single network connection that is attempting to be made, and you can choose to block it or allow it. What he says is, hey, entire categories of telemetry, you should be able to block, you should be able to turn it all off. In my opinion, we should do kind of like Ubuntu's doing, at least some of their defaults. Hey, an error has occurred. Would you like us to send the report? And if I say no, it doesn't send anything. You see, here's the problem. Even if my computer is perpetually collecting telemetry and sending it on, and I get a blue screen of death, and then I get another blue screen of death, and I get another blue screen of death, no amount of sending that data helps me in my immediate problem of getting my computer stable. Microsoft won't even lift a finger unless it receives millions of these reports at the same time. So why don't we do it this way? Collect the capability of having some error reporting only if there is a problem, not a bunch of basic stuff, only if there is a problem. And then it does not set it by default. If there is a problem, then you can boot into a subset. And it's the same type of thing you have. Of course, they bricked it with that one update a couple weeks ago. But you can boot into a low level of Windows, which just gets onto the internet, makes those network connections to work on fixing problems, doing network configurations. Have it so that if your computer doesn't start, you can easily turn that on and then upload that diagnostic report of the specific failure. Will that include a lot of other information I may not want to pass aside, like fingerprinting stuff on my processor or things like that? Yes, but it still gives me the total option. That is how they should handle it. I like what Ubuntu does. An error happened. Should we send the report? Yes or no? And that is really the thing. So I do not agree that we need a constant flow of basic telemetry data that we cannot turn off. It is my computer. I should be able to choose without any third-party configurations or network configurations that Microsoft sends my data or not. And I don't think that should be tied into some special power user version. That should just be basic. But nevertheless, that was the first point. The second one is his pro version would turn off all of the nags and suggestions and things like this. Now, this is an interesting point because near the end of his video, he says that this mode would cost extra money. Why? Because you're not getting that monetization. So you've added a bunch of ways that you extract more money from me, but you want me to pay to turn off the things you just turned on. I'm not playing that game. It's extra code that you chose to write to quote unquote monetize your system. Why should I have to pay to remove that type of stuff? I've just paid the licensing fee and I've just paid for the computer. We could argue that point. That's the point I'm kind of teetering on the edge. Would I pay more for a system that doesn't nag me? Possibly, as long as it doesn't. What are these nags and suggestions? Of course, there was just one that they were starting to roll out in the file manager, and then there was a little bit of a kickback on that, and so they pulled it. They said, we're going to do it at a later date. Why? Well, it's a classic big tech approach. Roll something out, everyone complains, stop the rollout, secretly roll it out later on. Okay, what they were trying to do is now, that file explorer was just unused space. So now they're going to start giving you nags and suggestions there. So now you'll get random notifications. I'm in the middle of something important. Have you tried OneDrive? No, because I haven't set it up. And you've already asked me this. But come on, you might have changed your mind in the last 10 minutes. They give you the notifications on those. They give you notifications and specific ads on the weather app that's built into the system. Now they want to give you notifications on the file manager. That's the one that they just pulled back on. And one of the points that Dave says in his video that is awesome, he says, you feel like your desktop is the last place of empty space that has not been monetized yet. Yes, we're going to start seeing ads popping up on the desktop. I agree with him. And he says in his pro version, you would turn off everything that is a suggestion, an advertisement, a nudge, anything else, because I know you have these services. I'm not interested, hence I didn't set them up. So you should have a way to say, never give me a single suggestion ever, period. And that shouldn't be complicated because the entire purpose of an operating system is to get the hell out of your way so you can get your work done. Not as I'm recording a video and my system gives me a random notification noise in the midst of my video because it wants me to set up OneDrive despite I've already rejected OneDrive 12 times by this point. Sadly, Linux is starting to adopt this, and it sickens me. Two desktops, Plasma and GNOME. Now, Plasma has an easy way to turn the feature off, and it only gives you a suggestion one time as a notification near Christmas to say, hey, can you consider donating to Plasma? I think this is a mistake, but at least they rolled it out in a way that if I'm aware it's there, I can turn it off in the settings. I didn't notice if GNOME has it in the settings, but the latest release of GNOME, in fact, it even popped up on me randomly on my last Fedora video, if you watched my last Fedora video. They are now, not just once a year, just random times, giving you a notification to donate. That is borrowing from Microsoft's playbook, and I'm not particularly surprised from the GNOME Foundation. The problem is, a notification is supposed to be a notification for something going on in your system, not a pop up and a sound and a click and distract me away from what I'm doing. Hey, would you give me money? No, GNOME, I'm not going to. No, not happening, GNOME. I didn't see if there was a way to turn it off, but they've also said it's happening. Now, will this result in more income? Absolutely. Absolutely. As one video showed, that Plasma, probably in direct response to this, did get a lot of funds out of this. But is it still the right thing to do? No, because the operating system should be getting out of my way. Now, what GNOME did right in their implementation is they did add the donate button to the about the system page. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with a static donation button that appears on a page that I might go to look at my system information or things like that. I'm okay with that. But random notifications, no. Unfortunately, Linux is borrowing into this. So that is something that we have to look at. So there was your telemetry, there's your ads, notifications, and ultimately, there is one more thing that he didn't touch on at all that I think he didn't go far enough, and that is AI. He never addressed the AI. The point is right now, and I'm starting to agree with people, that the whole push of Windows 11 and killing off Windows 10 is to cram AI deeply embedded in the system. And I think that there is a major fundamental problem with that. We should have a means of Windows that has no AI at all. This is your Windows with the AI. This is your Windows with no AI. I should have an AI-free experience if that is my particular choice. Such a thing as AI should not be hoisted upon me. So I do think that he needs to add that onto his particular viewpoints there. The other things that he mentioned, which I wasn't going to address here, was actually the settings. Of course, Windows, starting with Windows, was it starting with Windows 8 or starting with Windows 10, I think? Their control panel started to become fragmented between all these different panels. His mode says, hey, you should just unify that. I don't even think we need a mode for that. I think that the settings system, they need to either abandon the settings app and put everything back in the control panel where we could find everything, or abandon the control panel, put everything in the settings. And I agree with his point completely. You do not need to be doing this. And this should not be a power user issue. That should be like, what are you thinking, Microsoft? It should be unified in that. Now, does Linux suffer that problem? That kind of depends on the desktop, obviously, and maybe even the distro. MX Linux, for example, has a ton of extra system tools that are not available on other desktop environments or other distros, I should say. That's a distro suite of tools, not a desktop environment suite of tools. Mostly, though, Linux distributions do actually have all of the system tools, no matter which desktop or which distribution you're using. Usually those settings panels are unified. The only one off the top of my head that's not is Budgie, because they still have a Budgie desktop settings, which is in a different place than the Budgie settings, which is basically a carryover from the GNOME roots. And so there is that. Come to think of it, I'm not sure if Cosmic have solved that problem yet either, being is that it was highly inspired by GNOME, but I can't remember off the top. But that was, I wasn't going to talk a whole lot about that, but the point he didn't talk about that I would like to address is the AI. We should have a very simple option to say, on basic setup, I want no AI, in which case absolutely no code, core, base, anything, nothing AI related should be installed on my computer. That should be able to be installed separately. Now, that unfortunately is starting to become deeply embedded inside of the Windows app ecosystem, and that is a fundamental problem. So, is Windows going to have any form of these modes? Absolutely not. That is my problem. They are not going to want to listen to the users. They don't want to listen to their former developers. They will not remove the telemetry. They will not remove the AI. They will not remove the online accounts, and they will not remove their ads and nudges and suggestions, because they are now a nameless and faceless corporation that does not care what you want. That is a fundamental problem. Now, for me, that is why I switched to Linux. Now, if Windows were to remove the telemetry, the ads, the nudges, and all that kind of stuff, would I use it? Probably not. If they never put it in, would I be using Linux right now? Probably not. And that's an interesting take, because it really was that telemetry that pushed me to Linux. But now that I'm here, I've fallen in love with the free and open source philosophy, and I've fallen in love with the fact that I have full control over my system. Unlike Windows, I use Linux Mint as my primary operating system on most of my computers. Linux Mint is still constantly listening to their users. Even in the latest iteration, the next updates that are not even yet out, we are on Linux Mint 22.2. 22.3, they're rolling out their new menu layout. Their new menu layout, they rolled it out. They listened to the feedback for the community for the last 6 months, and then they are making tweaks and adjustments. I talked about that in my video earlier this week, but they're making tweaks and adjustments to put those power options, the search options, and other features of the menu in different locations based on user feedback. Every single version of Linux Mint since I have been using it, they listen to their users. They implement many of those positive changes into their system so that we have an operating system that is growing with the current needs of the current users. Now, Linux itself is, of course, a little bit different than the Windows ecosystem, but for the average computer user, Linux will do everything that you will need to be able to do. And I always encourage people to try out Linux Mint as your first. So that is kind of where we're at. So ultimately, 2 final points I had to wrap up. Number one, I completely agree with Dave's Garage that we need a mode for power users who know how to use their computers and they take responsibility for errors. Okay, Microsoft wants to push online accounts so you don't lose your logins. Well, you kind of still will, by the way, because they're trying to tie those logins to password lists and tying them to the TPM on your computer. They haven't really provided external means to get back into those. I don't know, kind of interesting. But I should have the ability, if I bought a computer, I should have the ability to break that computer. If I want to go to Best Buy and pick up a computer and take it to the batting field and play baseball with it, that should be my prerogative. Now, I would probably be stupid and wasteful for doing such a thing, so I wouldn't. However, it is my prerogative. I've purchased it. If I want to unlock my computer and take the responsibility for what I do with my computer, they should absolutely have a mode for me to do exactly with my computer what I want. That is where I agree with him. I also, though, think moving forward, this doesn't go far enough. We also need a basic mode that is nothing more than the basic Windows that strips out all of the AI. It strips out all of the internet first approaches, strips out all of the Microsoft accounts. It gives us no apps that are not basic core system related apps. Give me my disk managers and my character maps, but I don't need Candy Crush or Xbox gaming or anything like that. Is this possible? Absolutely. It has been proven with the TinyCore application that you can use to install Windows, still Windows 11, the core components without any of that crap that Dave mentions in his video that is ruining Windows for users. Why does Windows not have an option to say, I want a stripped down Windows kernel and UI only means of Windows that can do the basic things of running Windows programs with no internet first, no AI, none of this other crap, none of your nudges, none of your suggestions, nothing. Just a pure computer. If Windows did that, would I switch to it? I probably, this far into my Linux journey, wouldn't, because I still don't trust what Microsoft does. But if they had provided me that option years ago, I would have never left their ecosystem. I will encourage you, have a look at Linux. You may very well fall in love with an open source alternative to your Windows computer that for the average user is going to be able to do everything you need to do. Let me know your thoughts about all that in the comments down below, and I will provide you a link at the end of this video, at least on YouTube, to my comprehensive Linux Mint review so you can see what it looks like. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.